Hi dreamers, I'm going to kick off a very exciting new series where I talk about NextGen investing. And let me explain the reason for this series. See, I'm trying to modernize my portfolio. After years of holding old favorites like J&J, 3M, Pepsi, and the like. And these aren't bad investments, but I've graduated to having a pretty diversified and stable income-generating portfolio, including very broad, stable bond funds like PTY, some safer ETFs like FDVV and Devo, a basket of REITs like STWD and STAG, some safer independent stocks like Duke and BTI, and also some dividend growth indie stocks with very high conviction, and I did a dedicated video on that recently. And then of course balancing that out with a new derivative income from things like QQQI and JPIX, which I've also done dedicated videos on. But now that I'm generating well over $100,000 in dividends, I'm starting to shift my thinking to the next 20 years and how human life is shifting. And so some of the topics that I'll be delving into include blockchain tech, software development, revolutionary energy, and today I'll be covering cybersecurity. And guys, there's a ton of research that I'm doing into every single category, so I'll be releasing this series over time. So get ready to sit back and get your notepad out as we dive into the first of these topics, cybersecurity. Are you ready? So I'll kick this whole thing off with this interesting concept, which will be the thread that I pull through all of these videos, which is an interesting idea that potentially AI is not part of the economy, but potentially AI is becoming the economy. Now, I might tweak this a little bit and say that AI is becoming an economy, a whole ecosystem unto itself. And I really like this article by Jack Bowman on why this trend is both similar to past bubbles that we've had and also dissimilar. And I really like this analogy of the railroad bubble of 1881, which of course was way overvalued ahead of its time. But if you think about it, it's also one of the best performing stock categories over the last 100+ years. So potentially that's a way to think about AI. Are some of the valuations pulled forward and a little bit overvalued? Potentially. But it's also a potential that AI will be the rails upon which everything runs for the foreseeable future. And with that in mind, just think about the fact that we are still in very early days of what this AI boom will ultimately produce and be like. And he's got a couple of other interesting graphs in here that I'll point out. One is that a lot of people think about AI as the chatbots that they're using in their everyday lives. And to some extent, that's right. And you can see that ChatGPT is the winner by far, followed by Microsoft Copilot and Google Gemini. But that's really just the tip of the iceberg. But another thing you have to think about is that when you look at what goods and services are actually being purchased, you can see this category of digital products being far and away the largest year-over-year change in retail sales. And so just think about the kinds of things that you right now are buying. Potentially streaming music, software as a service platforms, specific kinds of apps that help you with your daily lives. And all of these types of new products are the kinds of products that will be using AI and will ultimately need some level of security. And then if we go just a little bit deeper into the business realm, you can see the capital expenditure in the area of AI with Microsoft, Meta, Alphabet, and Amazon really pouring money into the back end of business, which will ultimately change the business pace and speed, and even how jobs are performed over the next few decades. So if you think about this AI thread runs deep from the surface area all the way back through the fundamentals of how businesses are and will perform. So with all that in mind, let's turn to cybersecurity in particular. So first and foremost, what is cybersecurity? Well, cybersecurity is the practice of protecting computer systems, networks, and data from digital attacks, unauthorized access, or even criminal use. And so just even thinking about some of the digital products that we were just talking about, think of all of these types of cybersecurity measures, like network security, where there's a need to protect the network infrastructure itself from unauthorized access. And then there's application security, so that the software itself is protected from attackers. And then think about the information security, protecting the actual information in all forms. There's also cloud security, making sure that the data and applications that are stored and processed in the cloud is also secure. And then think about Internet of Things, which could include everything from your cameras to, in the future, your car, and making sure that all of those internet-connected devices and the data that they generate are also protected. And then there's protecting the identity of users who are actually controlling access to the systems and data. And so, guys, it really doesn't take an expert to start to realize all of the different layers that need security. And so you might be saying, well, Dream, cybersecurity has been around for quite a long time, really since the dawn of the internet. And that's true. But take a look at this recent McKinsey & Company article that talks about why AI is drastically changing the need and the approach in cybersecurity today. And basically what they covered is that AI is rapidly reshaping the cybersecurity landscape because AI itself is quickly advancing cyber threats. Because think about it, AI is actually being used by the attacker and therefore accelerating the speed of cyber attacks, with breakout times now often under an hour. And that allows the ability of hackers to use AI tools like creating phishing emails, fake websites, deepfake videos, and crafting personalized, realistic messages. Essentially, they're using AI in their attacks to weaponize and even poison AI models used by companies. And so because of that, cybersecurity itself needs an AI defense, because the organizations need AI to reduce the time to detect, respond, and recover, and stay ahead of these advanced attacks. And so hopefully you're starting to pick up how significant and huge this brand new area is in cybersecurity. But how big is it going to be? Well, the size of the cybersecurity market is big and getting bigger. And so you can see the relative size here, that the global cybersecurity market size was estimated in US dollars to be $4.68 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach over $12 billion by 2033, with the entire industry growing at a CAGR of about 12% from 2025 through 2033. And you can see that's broken up into really two pieces: the solution, and then on top of that, services. And I'm also recording this on the same day that Palo Alto Networks reported very good earnings. And part of the bull case for Palo Alto Networks is that as organizations increase the integration of AI into their operations, the demand for specialized security solutions to protect those models, data, and infrastructure is expected to grow rapidly, and that Palo Alto has an early mover advantage, which is great. But you should also know that the bear case for Palo Alto is the competitive landscape. And with such big opportunity is going to come a lot of competition. And that, my friends, is going to be our challenge as we look at the next generation high growth areas like cloud security, zero trust, and AI security operations. And so you can see the day after they're reporting revenue of over $2.5 billion, their stock is up almost 3%. And I wanted to show you this in particular, which shows not only product revenue over the last several quarters, but here you can see specifically the growth in subscription and support revenue, which points to how important the services part of this industry and how big that is going to be. But who are the peers that are competing and might overtake Palo Alto in the future? So if we take a look at some of the peers that Palo Alto Networks has, you can see CrowdStrike Holdings, Fortinet, ServiceNow, Zscaler, and CyberArk Software, which come up as main competitors. And if we take a look at how they've performed over the last year, you can see CrowdStrike, CyberArk Software, and Zscaler as leading in total return. But over the past 3 years, Palo Alto, CrowdStrike and CyberArk have really been the leaders. But as I pointed out, the future is going to be hotly contested, and no matter how much research we do backtesting the total return and performance, this is really where the sidewalk ends. And what's coming in the next 10 to 20 years is going to be greenfield. And so how are you going to stay on top of these very complicated and fast-moving turns over the next couple of decades? Well, one of the ways I'm thinking about doing that is through holding something like HACK, which is Amplify's cybersecurity ETF. And here you can see the top holdings, which include major support beams for the cybersecurity future, like Broadcom and Cisco. But you can also see them getting right into those cybersecurity companies right here. And another one that I've taken a look at is CIBR, which is the First Trust cybersecurity ETF. And they also include a lot of the same holdings, but with a little bit of a different approach and a different weighting. And if you look at some of the peers to CIBR and HACK, you can see some of the competitor ETFs for cybersecurity, like one from iShares and one from Global X. But in terms of the assets under management, you can see that CIBR and HACK are two of the biggest ones. And once again, we can backtest the total return of these ETFs. But one of the things just to keep in mind is that this is an industry that is just heating up and will drastically change and accelerate over the next decade. And one of the things I like about holding an ETF in this area is that they are going to do rebalancing for you. So in the case of CIBR, their index is going to be semi-annually reevaluated in March and September. But if at any time during the year other than the evaluation period, if a security no longer meets the eligibility criteria, they will also be editing the ETF. And that's something that you don't have to think about. And these guys have been thinking about this sector for a little while, with the cyber fund starting in 2015, a good 10 years ago. And that's similar to the Amplify fund too, starting over 10 years ago in 2014. And their rebalance happens on a quarterly basis, as they reconstitute and rebalance in March, June, September, and December. So by this point, I hope that I've convinced you that this is not only a big opportunity, but also pretty fast growing and very dynamic in how this is going to unfold over the next couple decades. And also, I hope that I've given you some thoughts on some individual companies to dig into, and in addition, a couple of growth basket ETFs that allows you to get in the game without having to pick and choose the winners. But I'll leave you with a couple of other interesting ideas, just to keep you on your toes. One idea is that Google is actively getting involved in cybersecurity in a variety of different ways. And one of the ways I wanted to point out that probably isn't foremost on your radar is that Google actually acquired a cybersecurity firm, Mandiant, in 2022 for over $5 billion. And Mandiant is actually a company that offers consulting to other companies in the areas of AI security and cybersecurity transformation. So when you think about Google, think broadly about some of the areas that they are getting into. And another thing I wanted to point out, and this is dated August 19th, 2025, is that multiple hedge funds have recently been buying shares of Aon, including Relia Zuckerberg Hansen LLC, which, oh, by the way, Relia is Randy Zuckerberg, Mark's sister. And if you've never heard of Aon, they have tons of different capabilities, with one of those major capabilities being cyber risk consulting, so they can help assess, analyze, mitigate, and recover. And if you look at the other contenders in the space, in terms of cybersecurity incident response services, it actually shows Google and Aon as the current leaders in the space, with some of the other players, including the big consulting firms, and even players like Cisco and IBM. So dreamers, I hope that was helpful for you as you think about some of the next generation investments, and keep a lookout for additional videos in this series as you and I continue to generate amazing income to cover our bills, with an eye towards growth so we don't miss out on the next wave of winners. Let me know what you think in the comments. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this dividend income update. And if you want a richer, real-time experience with me, you can always follow me on Instagram or X. And if you're doing your own research using Seeking Alpha, feel free to find the link below to subscribe if you want, no pressure. As always, I encourage you to do your own research, then implement and learn by putting it into practice. And as a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor, so keep in mind these videos are for entertainment and inspiration only. I'll see you on the flip side.